Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight, I've got the internet psychologist Graham Jones, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and particularly Chat GPT. In fact, I put into Chat GPT moments ago asking for information about Graham. It came up with an awful lot of information. I'm not going to read all this out, but I'm going to read you just one or two interesting bits. Introducing Graham Jones, the highly respected internet psychologist. Graham possesses a unique skill that allows him to navigate the complexities of the digital world with ease, unraveling the intricacies of human online behavior. We're looking forward to all that, Graham. From understanding the latest trends to deciphering the ways people interact on social media platforms and engage on online shopping. Graham is a vital resource in today's technically driven society. Well, Graham, I could go on for a long time because ChatGPT seems to know a lot about you, probably more than Kathy, your wife, knows about you.
Yeah.
Welcome, welcome, Graham.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining us, and it's great to have you here. And please teach us about artificial intelligence.
It seems to know more about me than I do. I mean, so yeah, I think the one thing I want to do is caveat what I'm about to say. And that is that whatever I tell you about artificial intelligence is either going to be inaccurate, factually incorrect, or out of date by the time we finish this meeting. So it is rapidly growing. There is, dramatic change happening the whole time with artificial intelligence. So that's one of the problems we as humans have, that the pace of change is beyond anything we've ever experienced. And, the pace of change with the internet was beyond anything we'd ever experienced up until about 30 years ago. And suddenly keeping up with what the internet is doing was pretty difficult for humans. Now the pace of change is even worse with artificial intelligence. So keeping up with it is a problem. And when humans are faced with a difficulty like that, they do one of two things. They either go, I can't be bothered, because it's all too complicated and it's all too difficult to keep up, because if I try and keep up, I can't. Or they dive straight in and just hope for the best and don't worry about it too much. Now, there are all kinds of reasons why you might choose one of those options. The problem is that for those of us in business, the pace of change means that unless you do dive in, then I'm afraid you won't be in business. It really is as simple as that. That we have to take advantage of what AI offers, because otherwise other people will be stealing your business who are using AI. So for those of us in business, there's no option. You do have to dive in. So if you're one of those people who have been a bit kind of, oh dear, I'm a bit concerned about it, you've now got to change that and be an active user. But we worry about it, don't we? Because there's all the kind of negatives that we hear about AI. There was the example of Chelsea Gates from Alabama. So she had a phone call from her mother. It was her mother's phone number that came up on her phone. It was her mother's voice talking to her. And her mother said, I'm in trouble. I need your help. Her mother was crying. And there were other voices in the background. And eventually she passed the phone over to this other person because she couldn't really speak. She was trying to tell Chelsea about the situation she was in. She was talking about the men who had kidnapped her. And one of the men took the phone from Chelsea Gates's mother and spoke to Chelsea and said, yeah, we've got your mother. If you don't pay us $1,000, we'll kill her. And so Chelsea thought, well, I'll have to pay the $1,000, because she didn't know what else to do. So they'd given her some information as to pay the $1,000. She paid the $1,000. And then they said, thank you. She rang her mum back, and her mum said, what men? What person who's kidnapped me? I haven't just phoned you. And it was a complete scam created by artificial intelligence. And the intelligent humans behind this were intelligent enough to know that if they'd asked for $250,000, nobody's going to pay. But if you ask people for, a few $100s, $500, $1,000, they're going to pay because they heard their mother or their daughter or their son or whatever supposedly crying at the other end. Of course, all of that was faked by artificial intelligence, as was the phone number spoofing. So that's artificial intelligence. It gets a bad rap. It gets a bad press because of things like that. But it's not just straightforward phone calls like that can be faked. You can fake conversations. So the chair of the Federal Reserve had a 20-minute conversation with President Zelensky. Now, clearly, the chair of the Federal Reserve is going to have occasional conversations with the president of Ukraine for obvious reasons about, the funding of that's being provided by the USA. The problem is this was not President Zelensky. It was fake. The whole conversation was faked. And it took about 20 minutes before the chair of the Federal Reserve realized that he wasn't actually talking to the person he had previously been speaking to. So we see examples like that all the time of how dangerous and problematic it can be to have artificial intelligence. So that's what puts people off. They go, well, I don't want to get in this world because there are all these negative things. But there are huge positives, some absolutely massive positives. So one thing that recently happened in the UK, there's a trial of artificial intelligence in the diagnosis of breast cancer. They've had to stop the trial because the artificial intelligence is too successful, and to not offer it to patients would be unethical. So here's what happens when women have a mammogram for potential breast cancer. A quarter of those mammograms are returned as having no breast cancer, when in fact they do. And those mammograms are checked by 2 radiologists. They look at them very carefully. They agree that there is no sign of cancer in that woman. Unfortunately, there is a sign of cancer, but the humans haven't spotted it. Artificial intelligence can spot it. So what happens is, at the moment, a quarter of women who have got cancer are told they haven't. And a little while later, when it can be spotted by the human eye, then, of course, they can get treatment, but they're further down the line at that point. And so they're further down the line, and that means treatment has to be more aggressive or is less likely to be successful. So the sooner, obviously, we can get them, artificial intelligence can now spot 99 point, and I can't remember what the point is, but it's, as near as makes no difference to 100% of spotting these cancers at a point when doctors, radiologists can't spot them. So there's a clear reason why we should be using artificial intelligence in medical diagnosis. Just by checking artificial intelligence, just by checking your iris, can determine whether or not you're going to get Parkinson's disease. Oh, so there are lots of artificial intelligence benefits in the healthcare sector. But there's lots of benefits in the business sector. We can automate things. We can do things that would take us a huge amount of time and therefore become more productive. And one of the biggest problems in business at the moment is a severe lack of productivity. Productivity in the world has largely been static since 2008. And it's because we use the technology that we do use really badly. So there is, everybody thinks it's down to the financial crash of 2008, but it's not. It had started just before then. So the slowing down of productivity, you can look at the economic graphs, it started before then. It's down to the way we use technology. So actually what we now need to do is use the benefits of this fantastic new technology to improve our productivity, because we've become, knee deep in emails and, well, neck deep in emails, or over your head in emails, really. Somebody said, what would you do, Graham, if there was one thing you could do in the world? I said, I'd ban email. I would remove it from the planet because it's the biggest productivity killer we've ever had. But that's me on my hobby horse, so I'll just go away from that. But artificial intelligence can answer your emails, and it can answer them intelligently. And you can get it to sort out your emails, answer your emails, deal with things in a way that's going to save you huge amounts of time. We can automate a vast amount of business, giving us time to concentrate on the real bit of business, the stuff we want to work on, the being with customers and so on. So there are huge advantages to AI in business, as well as many other areas. For example, if you wanted in business to create some PowerPoint slides, I'm going to show you some PowerPoint slides a bit later on. But if you wanted to create some PowerPoint slides and you'd got some text, it might take you a morning to fiddle about and then look at them and go, well, they're okay, but they're not the best designed. Well, you can get artificial intelligence to do all of that for you without you having to type very much, all in about 3 or 4 minutes. So it will save you a huge amount of time to help you communicate better and make your slides look better than what you currently might have. So we can use artificial intelligence to do all kinds of automatic things that would currently waste our time, or does waste our time. People spend hours and hours and hours trying to create things when it can be done very quickly. The website content for you can be created very quickly. I use some automatic software to create articles for my website, and I edit them and I rewrite them a bit, but it's learning my way of writing. So it's learning from me how it should write like me. I recently did an experiment, as some of you probably know, I'm an academic. So I recently did an experiment with marking students' work. The bane of every academic's life is marking, having to mark, you've got even 20 students and they've all written 3,000 word assignment and it's all on the same subject. So you're reading the same stuff over and over again, and you've got to read 60,000 words of that and comment on all of that intelligently. And it's difficult to do and to remain, bright and as you are with the last student, as you were with the first student, and to give them fair assessment. So I've taught ChatGPT to mark like me. So I've given it examples of my previous marking. I've asked it questions. I've had a long interrogation with it. And now I can put in a student's essay and it can give me all the comments in my voice, marking to my standards in the way I would do. It takes me, instead of taking me about an hour and a quarter to mark each student's work, it's now taking me about 10 minutes. So there's huge benefits for me and also for the students, because the students get work marked fairly, whether they're the first student or the 50th student. So actually it's beneficial for them for me to use this. So, but I couldn't use it without training it. So if we train it to be like you, it can do your writing, it can do your whatever else you have to do in the way you do it. So there are significant benefits for us in terms of productivity, and in terms of, being able to do other things. I don't know how long you've sat in front of your computer all day and not walked very much. Whereas you can get your work done with things like ChatGPT in a fraction of the time, enabling you to get up and about and be more healthy. So there are lots of other additional advantages that it will bring society by enabling us to not just sit in front of a computer screen all day, every day, which is a bane of all our lives, I'm quite sure. But what if you wanted to create some graphics for your website or some graphics for a brochure you're having done? You would have to pay a graphic artist, or you'd have to pay a photographer to produce these works. You don't need to do that. You just type into ChatGPT what you want and it will produce you a graphic for you. And the more you teach it, usually what you have to do to produce a graphic is go back 2 or 3 times and say, well, I like that, but can you just tweak this bit? And it will do that and eventually give you the graphic you like, free of charge, unless you're using ChatGPT 4, for which you pay $20 a month. The difference between the free version, ChatGPT 3.5, and GPT-4 is that ChatGPT 3.5 has data up to 2022. And when it came out initially, it was till 2021. They've now fed in data for 2022. ChatGPT 4 has data up to the previous 24 hours, so it's as old as yesterday. ChatGPT 5, which is due out this summer, will enable you to have live data, so it will be up to the moment. So ChatGPT 3.5 uses billions of data points. ChatGPT 4 uses trillions of data points. And ChatGPT 5, well, we can't count them because it's just the trillions upon trillions of data points that ChatGPT 4 uses, plus everything else that is currently being added to the internet right at this moment. But ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI, which is the majority shareholder of that is Microsoft. But of course, all the other big companies are producing their own large language modules, large language model GPTs. That means generative pre-trained. So pre-transformed, sorry. So it transforms what you put into it. So what the other companies are, Google is producing something called Gemini. That's not quite as good as GPT-4 at the moment, but it's really catching up. Amazon has something called Anthropic. So you've got Amazon, and Amazon have just put in another 2.5 billion of investment into developing that. So you've got three of the biggest IT companies now producing massive large language models. You can now go to something called you.com, which integrates all of them. So you can go, rather than go to ChatGPT, you can go to you.com, sign up for an account, which is $20 a month, but you get the pro version of ChatGPT, the pro version of Gemini, the pro version of Anthropic, all included in the price. So rather than paying $60, $70 a month, you're getting all of them together. And what you can do is ask you.com to use all of them at the same time. So because they're all using slightly different data sets and have been trained differently, you're using 3 lots of artificial intelligence all at the same time. But it's also got another one called Claude, which is another competitor. So it's got that in it as well. So you've got 4 artificial intelligence large language models using trillions and trillions of data points. It can come up with information very quickly. So, for example, I needed to produce a series of video scripts recently. I asked ChatGPT to produce them for me. I just told it what I needed it to do, and it did it. Produced the video scripts. I then put those scripts into Gemini. Asked Gemini to improve on them. Put them into you.com and asked it to look at what ChatGPT had produced, look what Gemini had produced, and for it to go off to the other large language models and produce me an even better version. So it took those and it produced an even better version of the output from the others to produce a set of video scripts that I was able to send to a client. And they're over the moon with what was produced. All of that took me probably about 10 minutes, maybe 15, to do all of that work. If I'd had to write the videos myself, that I'm talking of, probably 3 or 4 days work. They're all done in 15 minutes. And the client is over the moon. So there are huge advantages to this. If you're not using artificial intelligence, then today's the day to start.
I can see a lot of people listening to this, watching this on YouTube or the podcast saying, yeah, but you've just blown my mind, Graham. You're an IT guy. How do we do this? This is far too complicated. And also, Graham, apart from that, I'm wondering how it's going to answer my emails. How does it can't read my mind, can it?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, of course it can, because you train it. You train it in what you would think about that, so it learns from you.
Right.
Yeah. So it will learn how to be you. I mean, the one interesting thing about, I think the one thing that artificial intelligence is going to do is it's going to eventually create immortality, because you can have artificial versions of you having conversations with, artificial versions of anybody else, and they can live permanently on the internet once our demise has happened. So in 400 years, Tim will be visiting the eclipse because it will be his immortal artificial intelligence version.
Gee whiz. And
So,
how much time did it take you to put all these scripts in, that you're marking, so that it actually got the real Graham Jones, the marker?
so that took about 10 minutes to copy and paste the material.
What
I
did you
noticed there's a
do?
comment from fellow Nigel is asking, what about second marking? Yeah, so everything in the academic world has to be second marked and moderated. So it all has to go through that process anyway. So yeah, it doesn't change any of that, but it just means that the feedback the students are getting is higher quality because it's consistent quality. And the difficult thing with, however much we try, human beings get tired. And so, you're on a deadline to mark things and you've got, 50 scripts to mark and you've only got a few days. It's inevitable that you're going to give less feedback to the last few you mark than the first few you mark. And that's unfair on the students. Right. So this makes it fair because they get a level of marking, level of feedback that's equivalent across the whole cohort of students.
I bet you're the only academic in the world that's doing this, actually.
Not at all, no. I met an academic who's written 15 PhDs in the space of 2 days. So to write a PhD normally will take 3 years, 6 years if you do it part-time. A PhD is usually around 100,000 words, 70 to 100,000 words. A PhD has to have original data. So there's a thing called Amazon Turk, so Amazon Mechanical Turk. So if you go to Amazon Web Services, they've got a thing there called Mechanical Turk, which is like crowdfunding of data. So it's all original data. It took him 2 hours to do his first PhD. So it did the literature review, it collected the data, it wrote the discussion. So normally a PhD is in kind of 3 bits. So it did those 3 bits. And then it told him what the questions would be in a Viva. So you do what's called defend your PhD. So you go to an interview, a Viva interview, where you will have experts who will ask you questions. So ChatGPT produced the questions from the PhD it just written to say, these are the questions that will be asked in a Viva. And he then said, well, can you give me the answers to those? So it gave him the answers. So now he's got the answers to the Viva questions, and he has submitted 15 PhDs, and he will go to 15 Vivas. And he's writing a paper. So he's from the University of Salford. He's going to write a paper on, his initial title is The PhD is Dead. Because, you can just, and these are all original data. This is not, copied. This is not made up. This is not fictional. This is real stuff.
Okay, there was going to be a lot of questions for you, Graham. We're nearly out of time on this first segment, but I've got a couple of questions for you which need quick answers. If you're doing a piece of work for a client, is it ethical to provide it without admitting you've been using artificial intelligence?
It depends which bit it is, doesn't it? So if they ask me to write a consultancy report, they're expecting my intellect to be in there. They're expecting my thoughts. So if I was using something from that, then yes, I would have to admit that. But if I was using it to respond to an email, I don't see why I would need to do that, because I've trained it to. If we go back, Derek, you can remember 100 years ago, like me, can't you? Yeah. Yeah. So 100 years ago, we didn't write our letters. Somebody wrote them for us in the office. You asked a secretary, a personal assistant, can you reply to them saying this? They would write it for us. And they got to learn our kind of ways of working. And they would write a letter in one style for you and one style for your colleague who sat 2 desks away. So before the internet, before we had computers and we started to type things ourselves, other people wrote things on our behalf. And here we are, 30, 40, 50 years later, and we're going, oh, isn't it dreadful that other people write things on our behalf? Well, it was always that way before. So we seem to forget those kind of things. Yeah, so I don't see why I need to admit that, ChatGPT has written my emails, but if I've written a report that somebody is expecting me that it's my thoughts, then yes, I would have to admit that part of those thoughts were fed into, ChatGPT. But I'd be honest with them. I think that you've got to do that and say, yeah, I've produced this report by feeding in the data to ChatGPT, and this is what it gave me.
Part of ChatGPT would have done the easy bits. You would have gone through it and then added your personalization, your USPs to it. So I don't see why you should admit it, really. But who knows? I don't know.
It depends. It's about the extent of the use. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And what's the difference between the AI providers? This is the last question. What's the difference between them? There can't be any difference, can there, really?
Well, it's the way they've trained the models, what data they've used to train the models, how they process it, the kind of hardware they use. All of that affects the speed of what they do. So there's lots of technical issues involved that can make them slightly different.
But ChatGPT is the sort of VHS of it. It's sort of taken over, isn't it? It's the one that everyone talks about.
Yeah, because it made the first breakthroughs in this way of working. And it had been kind of experimental before, because obviously the first one that was public was 3.5. So that's a clue that there were at least 3 versions before it.
Sure.
It had been, in the background for several years. If you think about, artificial intelligence as a term, first came out in 1956 after the original paper that proposed it was published in 1943. Although they didn't use the word artificial intelligence in that paper, but the term artificial intelligence came out in 56. Then Alan Turing invented his Turing test to determine whether or not something is actually artificial intelligence. And the Turing test is if you sit a human in a room and it asks a question, that human asks a question, and in the other room, you've got another human who answers the question. And in another room, you've got a computer that answers the question. If the human who has asked the question can't determine which one of those is the computer answering the question and which one is the human, then that computer has clearly fooled the human being and therefore has passed the test of being intelligent like a human. That test was passed in 2014. So we know that that happened. It was the MIT had an experimental computer called ELIZA, and ELIZA was able to fool people into being a human being back in 2014. So it's been, ChatGPT has been around for a while, and we've got to, as they say, get with the program.
Well, we're going to keep asking you back to enlighten us, Graham, but
well, I need to come back tomorrow because it'll be different tomorrow.
That's it for today, except we're going to have a part 2 to this. But can I ask everybody on Monday Night Live to give Graham the usual round of applause? Thank you very much. Graham Jones, thanks for joining us. People want to get hold of Graham, it's grahamjones.co.uk. Put it into Google. There's a lot of Graham Joneses in the world you can imagine, but there's only one Graham Jones.
I'm the real one.
The real one, the internet psychologist. Are you sure you're real? I'm not sure you are.
No, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for joining me on Monday Night Live. If you like this on YouTube, please like it. Please comment on it because it helps us make this more productive. Thanks for joining us.